Clarity starts us on this journey of my next C, of constant learning. That gives us momentum. That means there's no fixed level on what's possible. That helps us to keep adapting. And resilience is about adapting. It's not a fixed thing. It's not how tough you are. It's how able you are to adapt and grow as things happen around you and learn and come out a different person, a better person with new skills and new experiences. I sat on the start line at the Olympics for 3 Olympic Games. And in between that, I trained 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, 49 weeks of the year. I also worked as a diplomat, specialising in conflict issues, and visited and worked in some chaotic, hostile environments around the world, including living and working in Basra in southern Iraq 10 years ago. Living and working on a military base. My home was a Red Sea container with bunk beds and a little toilet that sometimes had running water. And over the top, there were some extra metal deflection shields in case any incoming fire went in that direction. Every day, there were sirens, and there were loud thuds as incoming rockets and mortars landed. I was a student for a good number of years, and I am a parent. I work with a large number of organizations trying to be competitive and successful in an ever more challenging environment. So what's the common thread across all these worlds? It's people under pressure, people trying to be the best they can be, people trying to find ways to be resilient in order to sustain that performance. Why is it so difficult? That's because resilience isn't a fixed concept. It's personal, it's dynamic, and it's complex. It's personal because it's different for each of us, and we all have our different experiences that develop our own particular shape of resilience. It's dynamic because it's always changing as we accrue new experiences, see new things, try out new things. And it's complex because it's made up from all different aspects of our mental and physical makeup. So that requires a response as well to develop it that uses our physical and mental makeup. And there are certain areas that I think we overlook in our daily lives and across our working week that we should focus more on if we want to develop our resilience. And that is to spend time working on our mindset, to be aware of how we think and how that affects what we do, to be aware of our behaviors and the impact that has on the environment we're in, and to invest in the relationships, the people around us, who are the core to what we're going to achieve and the experience we have along the way. Often these things don't happen because they're not scheduled in Outlook, they're not things we've written on our to-do list, and so we don't develop in all the ways we could to become more resilient and to be able to sustain a higher level of the performance we're capable of. I want to break down the mindset, behaviors, resilience, and relationships piece into 3 themes now, my 3 C's as I call them: clarity, constant learning, and collaboration. And these 3 themes for me give us a way into developing our mindset, our behaviors, and our relationships. They provide a means of asking some questions that can help us to become more resilient and get closer to the potential that we're all capable of. Let's start with clarity. And actually, clarity starts first thing in the morning. It's about when we wake up and we think, why am I getting up today? What am I going to achieve today? What's driving me today? And there's a really important question just to think, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? This is where our mindset starts to take shape, and we'll set the processes that go through the day and determine whether it's a good day or not, and whether it's an exceptional day or not that you're capable of. It's a question that I used to ask every day when I was an Olympic rower. Why am I getting out of bed? When the alarm went off, I'd be aware, the first thing I was aware of was some messages from different parts of my body to my brain saying not to move, saying to stay in bed. My leg muscles exhausted. My back, aching. My shoulders, very stiff too. The best message physiologically that all these muscles were sending to my brain was, let's stay here a bit longer. So I had to have a really good reason to override that once I started thinking about it. I needed to have a good reason to get up and put my body through another 6 hours of training that day, as I'd done the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that. And I did have a good reason, and that's why I got out of bed. I wanted to be the best rower I could be. I wanted to see how fast I could make the boats go that I was in, and I wanted to see how well I could do at a World Championships and Olympic Games. And I connected to that every day. I asked myself that question every day, and I was really always connected to what I was trying to achieve, and that enabled me to get up and do some really hard, grim, and at times dull training. But that clarity is a really important foundation for getting the best out of ourselves, for being the best we can be. It's a really important part of resilience, because if we don't have a clarity of why we want to do something, when we get the challenges, when we get the setbacks, we won't find a way around it. If we don't know the why, then we won't get over the hurdles that come in our way. And if we do know the why, we'll be really imaginative and creative about finding ways around them. I like asking questions to get clarity. I also like to ask, what's your purpose? What is it that drives you? What are you trying to achieve? And I like to think about, what is it that success looks like? Not just in terms of results, not just in terms of winning or losing, but actually what's success for me on a daily basis. It's all the things I do. It's the way I'm thinking. It's the way I'm behaving. It's the way I'm building relationships and working with people around me. Actually, success is much more about that. It's much more about that daily process that I want to build and be proud of. There are certain things I can't control about the results, but I can control the way I think, the way I behave, and the way I build and work with people around me. Clarity is so important, but it's not easy. Some people say, in the world of Olympic sport, it's so clear-cut. You know when your races are. You know every 4 years there's going to be a clear result, a clear end race day, hopefully some medals. And the rest of the world is a bit more complex than that. And it is more complex, I agree. But the search for clarity is just as important. When I worked in a really chaotic environment in Basra, we didn't have perfect clarity. There wasn't going to be world peace on the 3rd of June, 2008. There wasn't going to be that wonderful endpoint, but it was still really important to keep searching for what are the things I can control, where I can have an influence, where I can do something positive. Clarity starts us on this journey of my next C, of constant learning. That gives us momentum. That means there's no fixed level on what's possible. That helps us to keep adapting. And resilience is about adapting. It's not a fixed thing. It's not how tough you are. It's how able you are to adapt and grow as things happen around you and learn and come out a different person, a better person with new skills and new experiences. It's not just about kind of winning and losing and dealing with that. It's about always learning. The great Nelson Mandela said, you win or you learn. And that's better than saying you win or you lose. But I want to go beyond that. I say you learn and you learn. Whether you win or lose, you're always learning. And actually, if you want to keep winning, you better be learning whilst you're winning. Otherwise, it won't keep happening. Always learning, getting that momentum. Resilience is about having a momentum that when something stops you in your tracks, you're able to keep going and getting back on track again. And there are lots of different ways to feed that process. It's about going out to get feedback, not waiting for it to come to you. Go and seek the feedback you need. Go and ask the people who've got the information you want, who've got the experiences, the success. They'll never say no. They'll always be happy to share it. Feedback shouldn't be waiting for things to come to you. Be hungry for it. Review how well you've done. Stop and reflect. I can't believe now, whenever I'm doing leadership programs, the most popular thing that people say, the reason they want to come on a program to learn to be a better leader is they want time to reflect. We've lost the ability to review and reflect what we do. But in high-performance sport, it's all about learning the lessons. Whether we won or lost a race, what went well? What could we improve? And what are we going to do differently next time? The marginal gains approach has been fundamental to improvements that have taken Team GB from winning 1 gold medal in 1996 to winning 29 in London through this process of small improvements and working with others outside of your world, getting out of your silo and finding other ways to keep making those 1% improvements. And as much as it's about those improvements, it's about the psychological process of being part of that, of the excitement that 1% is linked to making the boat go as fast as possible come the Olympic start line. It's being linked, all of us, that the 1%, the decisions we make in our minds about whether we do something as well as we could or just kind of don't bother because it's Friday afternoon. Those decisions depend on whether we feel it's exciting to make something 1% better that we're really tuned into doing that got us out of bed in the morning. And the last thing is to have a proactive, supportive environment. In order to learn, we need to make sure it's easy to learn. We need to make sure it's safe. And even though we don't have incoming rockets and mortars here, we still all need to go out of our way to make us feel safe to learn. I can remember an event when I was rowing, had a race. It didn't go very well. And as we sat as a crew to discuss it afterwards, one of the girls in the crew broke down. Said, I've had all this personal stress, some issues going on. It's affected my performance, and now I feel I've let us down. Someone else in the crew said, why didn't you ask for help? And our coach said, that's no good. We're never going to be a successful crew if we kind of have to wait for someone to come and ask us for help. If we're serious about this, if we're serious about supporting each other to bring our best, then we need to be supporting proactively. We need to know when someone isn't at their best and might have something else going on. We need to understand each other at a much deeper level. And when I worked in Basra 10 years ago, with all sorts of stresses, trying to stabilize a very conflict-ridden environment, living in my Red Sea container with incoming mortars every day, we had a fantastically proactive, supportive team. Whenever these events happened, whenever the sirens went off, we would always be in contact with each other. Where are you? How are you feeling? The same at the end of the day. How are you feeling? When I came back and worked in London, nobody ever asked me how I was feeling again, even though there were daily crises and new decrees from the Foreign Secretary or a natural disaster in a different part of the world that you're involved with. Everyone charged off in different directions. I thought, how interesting. I had to go to a war zone to find a working team where we actually could proactively support each other. It's absolutely fundamental to learning. It's fundamental to this last piece of collaboration, my last C. And collaboration is about going beyond just calling yourselves a team on a chart or sitting together in an office. It's making that shared commitment. It's having a shared objective that binds you together. And not just agreeing, well, we all want to achieve something, or in a rowing environment, we all want to win a medal. It's why we want to win that medal. Why is it important to me? Why is it important to you? Because we all bring different reasons. We need to understand those in order to get the best out of each other and be able to support each other. It's about making sure we go that next layer of connection. And that was something we talked about a lot in the diplomatic world. Diplomacy is about the whole business of building partnerships, of building alliances with the unlikeliest of allies, of finding ways to connect. Before I went to my first posting to Sarajevo in Bosnia, I had a chat with a very wise and eminent ambassador to get some advice. And I thought I was going to get a really interesting, fascinating, historical overview of the geopolitics of the Balkans. But I got a very short piece of advice from him. He said, I'm going to tell you there are 3 things. He said, although you'll be given reams and reams of historical, political briefing, you've got to read them, but that's not what's going to make the difference. There are 3 things that are going to make you the difference for you, and it's about connecting with the person you're talking to. You want to influence, you want to persuade. The first piece of advice is get to know the person behind the role. You'll see all sorts of diplomats, ministers, prime ministers, presidents. You want to find out who they are. What gets them out of bed in the morning? What do they really care about? Only if you know that, who they are as a person, do you have any chance of working with them and building something new together. And in order to do that, you need to listen more than you speak. You'll never persuade someone by the force of your rational arguments. It's about listening, about who they really are. And then you're able to find what you've got in common, the third point. It'll be so obvious the things you haven't got in common, the things that are stopping you from moving forward, the historical, cultural, political, linguistic barriers that stand between you. Your job is to find what you do have in common. And that gives you your way forward. That gives you your momentum. That gives you a relationship that can then be resilient enough to discuss the difficult political stuff. And I remembered this in many different circumstances where I, a kind of white middle-class girl from Essex, stood opposite a Bosnian war-torn politician and tried to persuade them to do something different. I remember that when I was talking to Iraqi militia leaders, and again, I needed to connect. I needed to find something. And I always did, and it was never about the politics. We needed that bond before we got to the political stuff. We need those bonds in order to have a resilient relationship that will get us through the difficult times. So questions, questions, questions. For me, that's the art of resilience. It's about knowing the why and persisting with asking those why questions. It's about making sure we're constantly learning, how could I do this differently? How could I do this better in a different way and bring some other advice and other perspectives in? And it's about always looking for those links, finding what we have in common, not what it is that separates us. And all of these factors came to the fore in my final Olympic experience in Athens. I'd been to my first Olympics and came 7th. I then trained another 4 years of 6-7 hours a day, 7 days a week, 49 weeks of the year, and I came 9th. I had a major crisis at that point. Lost a lot of self-belief, really questioned who I was, what was I about, what was I capable of. But those were good questions to ask. They got me back on track to think about performance in a different way, to think about how I could invest so much more in my mindset, to be aware of the behaviors and the relationships that are part of performance. It's not just about how physically strong I am and how precise I am about putting my oar in and out of the water. And so I decided to go back for another try to a 3rd Olympics with no guarantees of a better result. But I felt this time I had some other strategies to put in place to help me to try and deliver my best. We started to get some good results during that Olympiad, and the year before the Olympics, we won the World Championships. Fantastic, at last, to taste some success. Going into the Olympic year, it seemed as if everything was on track, but of course, nothing is ever straightforward. We had all sorts of setbacks. My rowing partner had a serious back injury that meant we weren't in the boat for a lot of the winter, so we were training separately. And yet we always had this mission of what might we be able to achieve, what could be possible when we do get back in the boat again. We had challenges with equipment, with coaches, with communication across the team, with selection because we'd been out of the boat for a while. But we did get selected into the British team, and that then gave us a short period of time from sort of April to August to try and get back to our top level. We had to learn fast. We had to see what was possible. We had to fail fast and learn the lessons. And when we got to Athens, we were full of hope and optimism about what was possible. We still had challenges during that week, during the 7 days. The first heat we went out to win and qualify for the final, we lost. We lost by 7 seconds. But we sat down and said, right, we've got 5 days. What's possible within those 5 days? And we made small adjustments still to our technique, to our mindsets, and still went out, even though you're at the Olympics and not doing long outings, still went out every time to improve the way we put our oar in the water by a fractional amount. We were still reviewing and learning each day, all the way up to the final. And the question that kept us going through that week, that's kept me going ever since as well, and that helps me to have that resilient, hopeful outlook for the future, is to say, don't focus on what's wrong. Don't ask what's wrong, but just ask what's possible. Thank you very much.